wasn't this kind of violence that was leading the
In plain sight of his co-workers, shot him 10 times.
Coca-Cola is a world full of lies, deception, immorality, corruption.
People make allegations like that, but it becomes very difficult to tie that down. If someone says something about you, there's got to be a chain of evidence which demonstrates it.
The Colombian government, multinationals like Coca-Cola and the paramilitary death squads all have something in common. They don't want any social movement, particularly a strong labor or human rights movement that can challenge their authority, their brutality, or their profits.
First of all, how did the University of Montana's contract with Coca-Cola even start?
I think it was signed by the Vice President for Administration and Finance as a result of an RFP that went out to vendors, and anybody who wanted to submit a bid could do so.
Wherever he has gone, he has created Coca-Cola contracts. I think it was up at the University of Maine, the University of Montana, and there was another university he was at, but wherever Bob Duringer showed up, there were Coca-Cola contracts at that university.
Duringer has got a history.
He's really no longer allowed to meet with student groups.
That's good, in a way. I mean, in a way that's kind of bad, though, too, because you're not able to infiltrate what he's doing, you know? I mean, the guy, every university he's been to, he's gotten a contract with Coca-Cola.
They own, in many cases, the HMOs in the health system. They own the lottery system locally, the contraband of gasoline. Basically, they own everything.
Hace por ahí 10 años atrás que se puso esto muy duro, mucha violencia y todo el mundo trabajaba era con miedo. Bajaban 2, 3 trabajadores y los mataban. Y bueno, ustedes sigan, los dejaban ahí tirados.
Since 1990, 8 Coca-Cola factory workers have been murdered in Colombia. In 1996, Isidro Gil was murdered at a plant in Carepa. In 2002, Adolfo Muñera was also killed. Gil and Muñera were both members of the trade union Senalternal. Isidro Gil's former union members now live in hiding. One of them was on shift during the morning of his murder.
Oí que sonó un disparo en la puerta. Entonces yo inmediatamente freno la montacarga y miro hacia atrás. Y yo veo que el compañero Isidro va cayendo de espaldas. Y veo el paramilitar dándole candela. Cuando yo llego donde el compañero Isidro, ya él está muerto, porque el primer impacto se lo pegaron en toda la frente.
The story in Carepa didn't end with the death of Isidro Gil. The same night, the union's office was set on fire and its leadership ordered to meet a paramilitary commander known as Caliche the next day in this local dance hall.
Hablando de sindicatos, dice Caliche, vamos a acabar con todo lo que sean sindicatos. Eso tiene que desaparecer por A o por B. Si no, vamos a la empresa y los reunimos a todos. Ya hay que todos reunidos en el piso. Pero para no hacer estas cosas, nos reunimos a los para que todo el mundo renuncie. Y el que no quiera renunciar, le damos la cabeza, no respondemos.
Los trabajadores ese mismo día, vía telefónica, me notifican de la situación y yo lo que le digo es que por encima de estar sindicalizados ellos tienen que proteger su vida, que deben renunciar porque no le dejan otra opción. Si no llevan la carta de renuncia a las 4 de la tarde, los iban a asesinar.
Y a todo el mundo y les dijeron que tenían que renunciar, que tenían que renunciar a ese sindicato. Les daban 24 horas. Eso fue todo.
Eso fue tipo 8 o 9 de la mañana. Y eso de las 5 o 6 de la tarde no había sindicalistas. Todo eso era, ahí me acuerdo como que ahora ayer parecía un comisariato. Todas las Todo estaba ahí la renuncia de los compañeros. Llegaron los otros, pagamos la onda y ya se acabó el sindicato.
The union's president, Javier Correa, received 50 resignation forms, all worded identically. With no more union members left and the entire leadership fled, the union at Carepa was no more. For the paramilitaries, it was mission accomplished. In the Miami court case, the union says it was a story foretold. Javier Correa claims that in weeks leading up to the killing, threats were made against its leadership in Carepa by the factory's manager. Correa was so concerned he wrote him a letter, a copy which Correa says was sent to Coca-Cola's office in Colombia. In it, he claims, the workers have heard the managers say in public places that the paramilitaries have already been ordered to destroy the union. Coca-Cola, Correa says, never responded to his warning. The Colombian government says this man is the mastermind behind most of the killings. Carlos Castaño leads the United Self-Defense Group of Colombia, an ultra-right-wing paramilitary group. It has around 12,000 armed fighters and is listed by the United States as a terrorist organization. Castaño says most trade unionists are fronts for Colombia's other terrorist groups, the far-left guerrillas, but there's little, if any, evidence of such links.
The power of the paramilitaries has made justice all but impossible in Colombia. This is one reason Coca-Cola has been targeted by the union. The company can be sued outside the country, while the paramilitary is only subject to the Colombian courts.
It's very hard on a local level to build these cases.
Sinal Trenal sued Coca-Cola in a Miami district court, claiming that Coca-Cola hired, contracted with, or otherwise directed paramilitary forces to murder, torture, illegally detain, or otherwise silence trade union leaders. The case was brought before Judge Jose E. Martinez in 2001 and would prove to be very unfortunate, considering California Senator Dianne Feinstein pointed out that Judge Martinez has a bias in favor of corporations. He also specialized in advising and even defending them. Martinez is also an active sports radio broadcaster for the Miami Hurricanes. The Canes are heavily funded by Coca-Cola. Since the University of Miami contracts with Coca-Cola and Judge Martinez works on behalf of the university, and he has a history of intimacy with corporations, Martinez has bias towards Coca-Cola. Martinez dismissed the Coca-Cola company from the lawsuit, deciding they didn't have significant ownership of their bottling plants in Colombia. Coke owns more than a third of stock in the Colombian bottling plants, and their corporate leaders in Atlanta also sit on their board. Even so, Martinez ruled that their bottling plant managers in Colombia weren't liable either. His decision was made in 2006 after he reviewed only a single document given to him by Coca-Cola. He also made the decision before any links between Coke and paramilitaries could even be presented in the case.
The union is still active here, but claims Panamco intimidated and falsely imprisoned some of its leaders in an attempt to discredit the union. Luis Eduardo Garcia and Domingo Flores were accused by the company of planting 2 bombs in the factory and having links with left-wing guerrillas. They were arrested on terrorism charges and imprisoned for 6 months, awaiting trial.
Solamente el man que nos trasladó desde allá, aquí a la 25 me decía, ve gran hijo de puta por andar metidos con el sindicato, ¿por qué no se salen de eso?
The case was thrown out before it came to court. No evidence of a bomb was ever found. In the Miami lawsuit, the union claims the men were deliberately set up. A Colombian prosecutor who investigated the case at the time himself questioned whether this was an action intended to harm the leadership of the union. Despite their ordeal, the union leaders still work at the plant, saying that if they leave, the company will have won. But their liberty has come at a price. While in jail, their salaries were suspended and they've received no compensation.
De ahí que no alcanzaba para pagar servicios públicos, mucho menos para pagar cuotas de la vivienda, el cual pues se fueron acumulando y ya no las tenían en remate cuando salimos nosotros. Frente a eso, las compañeras les tocó que salir a pedir limón. Mis hijos estaban estudiando, me tocó que no volvieran más al colegio porque no había con qué pagar y los echaron del colegio. A esos niños les quedó un trauma que aún todavía no hemos podido superarlo.
Ella ve un policía, ve algo y de una vez piensa que lo van a llevar otra vez. O sea, a ella le quedó ese temor de que el papá no va a volver, de que el papá se va y de pronto no vuelve.
Last year, Luis was at a shop on his round when he says two armed paramilitaries confronted him.
Estando acá, el tipo que estaba a la derecha se me vino, desenfundó el arma, sacó el arma del bolso, la desenfundó, tendió el arma y me dijo, le llegó su momento, hoy es su día.
That day, Luis was lucky, saved by a shopkeeper who called the police. Both men say their request for a transfer to a safer route has been ignored by Penamco, putting their lives at even greater risk.
Asesinar a mi hijo, que tenía 4 años de edad y que me lo iban a devolver en una bolsa plástica.
Mendoza thinks he continues to be a target because of his public criticism of Coke, and because of an incident in 2003 where he spotted paramilitaries in the office of the local bottling plant. He says the paramilitary were taking cases of Coke to sell for fundraising. Mendoza believes the plant management had a deal with the paramilitaries. Coca-Cola for union busting.
A ver, nosotros vemos ingresar a la fábrica de Coca-Cola a los paramilitares cuando estamos trabajando. Ese mismo hombre que había entrado el 14 de marzo, que la empresa sabía que era paramilitar, vuelve y entra el 16 de marzo con el permiso de la empresa y vuelve y les da el producto.
Coca-Cola has run into intense scrutiny in India, too. They were forced to shut down a plant in India after they had been found guilty of depleting and contaminating the water supply.
They should go ahead and implement the recommendations of a study that they commissioned and that they funded that came out in January 2008 that actually says that the Coca-Cola company must shut down one of its bottling plants in India, in Kaladera, in Rajasthan, in North India. And we're wondering what is taking them so long. And the reason the report stated that they should shut down the plant is because the report assessed the situation, the water situation in the area, and recognized very clearly that the Coca-Cola plant and its extraction of water is making worse significantly the already existing water crisis in the area. And in other words, the coexistence of the Coca-Cola bottling plant and the community and meeting the water needs is just not sustainable. It's not going to work. And so I'm here to tell them to go ahead and implement the recommendation that their own report recommended. Unfortunately, we're running into a lot of spin by the Coca-Cola company, this so-called corporate social responsibility that they're talking about, which is really a response by corporations to deal with globalization. But it's disingenuous, some of the stuff that they come out with, and frankly, some of the stuff we've heard in media in terms of the response to the report by Coca-Cola is outright lies.
Even in Turkey, they have denied workers their right to unionize. During a protest in a Coca-Cola plant, union workers, their spouses, and their children were allowed to be tear-gassed, raided, and assaulted. Since the scandals, several universities have suspended their contracts with the Coca-Cola company.
I know there have been lots of reports of things that happened in Colombia, as well as in India with regard to water. But I also know that the company has now put in place agreements where those are all being reviewed.
It's clear that President Dennison at the University of Montana doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about Coca-Cola. He even suggested that there was actually an investigation by the International Labor Organization that cleared Coke from any of these alleged abuses in Colombia. That's never happened. Coke tried to resolve or settle the situation, but they tried to do it more on their terms. They thought they could throw a lot of money at it. One of the things that Coca-Cola was demanding was that all the union leaders and activists that were involved in the lawsuit would all have to resign from the company. They could never work for the company again. There was another demand that was made on me personally, that not only would we have to end the campaign, but I personally could never say another bad thing about Coca-Cola for the rest of my life. I would never agree to that. I would agree to ending the campaign, but I will never allow Coca-Cola to put a muzzle on me. Not only would I disappear, the campaign would disappear, but I would have a muzzle on me for basically the rest of my life with respect to ever saying anything bad about Coca-Cola.
The Coca-Cola Company proposed that the International Labor Organization investigate everything. But during the investigation, Ed Potter worked for Coke. He also worked for the International Labor Organization. The investigation was therefore not independent. Potter was in bed with both Coke and the ILO. It gets worse. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, Coke went back on their promise even more by stopping the investigation altogether. There was never any investigation into the deaths of the Colombian leaders. There was no investigation into human rights abuses in Turkey or India for that matter either. An email was sent to President Dennison regarding Coke's abuses and the investigation. He simply defended Coca-Cola and wrote back with information he got from Coke's website. The website is filled with misinformation regarding the allegations of their abuse of workers and environment. They still claim that the International Labor Organization is investigating the allegations against them.
The assessment process was undertaken in January of this year to make sure that we were all in compliance with the requirements of law in every country.
I talked to the ILO in Geneva, said that, look, under no circumstances are we doing any investigation of Coca-Cola's past and present labor practice and policies. There was a report that did come out by the ILO. Again, it wasn't an investigation, but it was an assessment of current conditions in Colombia. It was very damaging to Coke. Coke tried to put a nice spin on it, but the report itself was very damaging to Coke.
There's been many articles put forth through the press and whatnot, essentially giving facts,
giving what they state or what they allege to be facts. Now, I don't question factual statements about somebody being killed or that sort of thing. I don't know anything about that. I'm not there to know that. But what I have to keep always in mind is that the fact that something happened doesn't mean that this group over here, this person over here is responsible.
Well, because it has the Coke name on it, though. It's part of the whole organization.
Well, you simply have to follow that through and find out where the control exists. And if that could have been demonstrated, it seems to me it would have been part of the district court cases in the Southern District Courts. And the corporation was removed from those cases. Well, I don't know whether that's the case or not. It seems to me that the investigation went on, and the result of the investigation is what we have to take. There have been lots of allegations in the past.
Right.
And you have to remember, keep in mind that Coca-Cola was dismissed from the federal suits in the Southern District Courts as a result of action by the judges because there was no evidence to tie the corporation to the events that were alleged.
President Dennison and the administration have talked with other universities that suspended their contracts.
Well, I think what you need to keep in mind is that the University of Michigan did in fact rescind the contract or suspend the contract until after the investigation was occurred or until after there was a negotiated contract between Coca-Cola and international consulting firm to look at the situation in Colombia. And as a result of that, then Michigan reinstated the contract, and the contract is currently in place.
Well, again, he didn't know what he was talking about because no such investigation was ever done.
The only reason the University of Michigan reinstated the contract with Coke was because Coke promised them the International Labor Organization would be investigating. Since the company lied to the university about the investigation, the university's vendor code of conduct requires their contract with Coke to be suspended. Therefore, since the University of Montana has the same vendor code of conduct, their contract with Coke should be suspended as well. The Coca-Cola Company does not belong on any ethical college campus considering the proven allegations against them that are listed on www.killercoke.org. There are many alternatives to Coca-Cola. In fact, many universities, including Rutgers, have kicked Coke off their campuses. Here are some of the Coca-Cola Company's products that you might not know about. A complete list of them is available online. Although the website says so, Dr. Pepper and Cadbury Schweppes are not Coke products. Students and faculty of universities worldwide need to keep pressuring and end their schools' contracts with Coke until they clean up their act.
Coca-Cola actually pays a lot of universities millions of dollars to be able to be the sole beverage provider on that campus. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is Coca-Cola wants to have their brand name associated with young people, and they want to have it associated with successful college sports teams. So if Coke is willing to pay your university money if, they can have their little logo up on the scoreboard at university events and sell all the soda at sporting events and stuff like that. So you have a university campus with 50,000 students, and Coca-Cola is the only company providing beverages on that campus.
A lot of people buy Coca-Cola not because they like Coca-Cola, they buy it because everywhere they see is the name Coca-Cola, okay? So they want to be associated with that brand name.
You have 50,000 students a year whose the only beverages that they can drink when they're on their campus are Coke products.
Coke is not producing products with a concern for health. They're producing products with the idea of hooking people on a taste and addicting them to something.
And Coke is banking on the fact that if you spend 4 years at a university where the only beverages you can drink are Coke products, then when you leave that university, you're going to be a lifetime consumer. So what we've realized is that if these contracts are valuable enough to Coke that they're willing to pay millions of dollars for them, if we can jeopardize them, then we can have some power over what Coke's doing in their supply chain.
Canadian students want you off our campuses. We know what you're up to. We know your human rights record. We know your environmental impact. We see through your greenwashing, and we want you out.
We want to say to Coke, stop trying to cover up your crimes and other unethical behavior. Start doing the right thing. Start acting like a responsible corporation.
I want you to go through factually all your claims. I want you to answer point by point all the claims you've got out on your corporate social responsibility, site, on your charter, on your code of conduct, and I want you to be able to answer and explain how you can say this stuff, because you can't. They can't actually back it up factually. So when they talk about being water neutral, I want to ask them, take me through the figures. How much water are you taking out? How much are you putting back? How are you putting it back? Is it working in state regulations? Show me the maths of how this works. That's what I want to do. I want them to explain the divergence between their image and the reality of our practice.
If I'm not telling the truth, Coke could sue me. But the truth is a strong defense. So I say, Coke, go ahead and sue me. All right? We can back up everything we say. We back it up. All we're looking for is to get, with respect to Colombia, is we would like our day in court. Well, Coca-Cola, what Coca-Cola does, we'd like our day in court. We'd like an opportunity to have a jury trial. But Coca-Cola, for years, they go through all these procedural issues. They got judges, like the one down in Miami, Judge Jose Martinez, who should have recused himself because of conflicts of interest. We never get our day in court.
Boycott Coca-Cola and demand that there be truly independent investigations. The cost of human life has now been calculated into the profits of the Coca-Cola Company.
We hit something of a constitutional snag, and by that I mean there's a provision in the Montana State Constitution that requires state institutions to take contracts from the lowest bidder.
Exactly. Yeah.
And since Coke is the lowest bidder, it doesn't allow outs on like labor rights issues, environmental issues. And in fact, that was one of the issues of the Purchasing Code of Conduct too, is we're modeled after Michigan's, but it had to be softer. And so our code is the University of Montana strongly encourages life.
Coke came to Colombia, seeking lower wages. They got just what they came for, but as we turn the pages, we find the workers do not like the sound of their children's hungry cries. So they said, we'll join the union. They began to organize. So Coke called up a terrorist group called the AUC. Said, we've got some problems at the factory. The AUC went to the plant, killed 2 union men, told the rest, you leave the union or we'll be back again. Well, Coke did not complain about this dirty deed. Why give workers higher wages when Coke is all they really need? They phoned the AUC, said thanks, without you we'd go broke. And to show our appreciation, here's 100 cases of Coke. The baby drinks it in his bottle and the water ain't no good. The dog drinks it, but he don't know if he should. Some folks say it's the nectar of the gods, but Coke is the drink of the death squads. Coke is the drink of the death squads. Well, these workers wouldn't take this situation lying down. Some went up to Georgia, said, look what's happened to our town. You American workers get downsized, as for us we just get shot.